Chapter 4, Montreal, Canada. After 16.5 hours, including a stop for refueling in Brussels, the airplane was approaching Montreal Airport. I was ready for the worst, in what was to come as we landed. As I knew already by then, the Israelis must have known I was coming to Canada, and probably were waiting for me. Anyway, it was worthwhile, simply by taking into consideration the worst scenario that could possibly come to be. My tension rose high, as I approached the immigration clerk in the arrivals booth, for passport check at Mirabel Airport, a nearby Montreal facility. I handed my passport, and had a feeling she was expecting me, although she did not show any sign of it. I waited, as she went through the procedure of inspections. She asked, "Where are you going to stay in Canada?" I said, "I don't know yet, miss." "How much money do you have?" she asked with a suspicious look in her face. "About $200. $200? She asked in disbelief. "Yes." "Can I see an immigration officer, madam?" "All right, follow me please." I found myself in a large lobby, waiting for an interview, in the immigration department in the Mirabel Airport. I waited for an hour, until a lady from the immigration authorities came to me, and I was asked to follow her. I strode right behind her to an office, where I was welcomed by another officer, who was seated behind a desk. For the next 2.5 hours, I was telling my story. They found it hard to believe, but the fact I arrived on board a Jordanian flag airline left no doubt it was true. I sounded genuine, they believed me, I thought it was sort of insurance that I will survive. Finally, they decided to put me into custody. I was driven off to a motel, in the center of Montreal, where they kept all illegal immigrants. This was about to be my home for the next 4 weeks. The hotel was simple 3 stars, located in the heart of Montreal. I was placed in a room with another Bangladesh fellow. The windows were sealed with iron net, but you could see the street through them. There were 2 beds and a color TV in the room. Everybody in the hotel had to stay away from the room during morning hours. There was a small lobby. Down the corridor it also had a color TV and some recreation activities. The entire population was of different nationalities. There were Cubans, Moroccans, Hindus, and Pakistanis. I was the only Israeli. During the time I was there, I had a chance to become friendly with most of them. The immigration officers who kept the place were friendly, and treated the occupants as guests. It was an excellent transition for me, from where I was only a few months before, and where I came from. The open door I was given. From time to time I was summoned to an immigration hearing, in the immigration court somewhere in Montreal. Although it sounded a little odd to the people in the immigration court, I claimed a refugee status, under the fact I was persecuted in Israel and had to run to Jordan. After the first hearing I was treated as a refugee and the only question was, whether it will be officially accepted or rejected, in which case I would have to be deported from Canada. During the time I spent there, I had a lot of opportunities to call the outside world via the public telephone, in the recreation room. It was already the end of May 1990. Summer was just about in. I laid one day on my bed, the TV was on and I was wandering back to the past to the days right after my discharge from military service. I was 22. I was a young ambitious guy. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I only knew whatever it is, it was going to be big. I was an adventure guy. I dreamed off adventures in life. I was young and full of energy and had everything in front of me. My memories took me back more and more, as I was lying in bed, in the middle of the day in an immigration motel, in Montreal, Canada. October 1978, Tel Aviv. It was already a year since I discharged from the service. I kept looking for the real thing for me. I was working in the Israeli aircraft industries as a mechanic, in the final line of manufacturing of the private jet Westwind 11-24, at Lod Airport. Although it was a job I liked very much, the essence of factory monotonous atmosphere was the reason it was considered in my view temporary. As the months went by, I kept looking for a reason to leave this job to find something more exciting. This more exciting opportunity came a short while later. I found out I can acquire a merchant marine degree and work as a ship officer. It was like discovering America. The chance to see the world fascinated me. I took the recruiting exams and was ready to board a ship. I was assigned a ship that sailed to North America in round trip of about 2 to 3 months. So, I had to wait for the ship to return from a 4-month journey. I kept the job at Badek, Israel Aircraft Industries while waiting and getting ready for the big change in life. I was going to do something really unusual, as it seemed at the time. I had to be ready to adjust to a new way of life. One night I was invited to a movie theater with a high school friend. It turned out to be a movie theater I will remember all my life. As the show was about to begin, my friend spotted in a few rows down 2 girls whom one of them he knew from childhood. He called them to join us and in a minute they were seated next to us. When we were introduced to each other, I knew the one girl I just met was very special. One quick look in her, somewhat shy eyes, revealed a soul I was to fall in love with. I didn't have time to look at her, for more than a few seconds. The lights went off and the show began. We exchanged a few words by whispering. I realized she was still a young soldier, in a nearby base in Tel Aviv. This was Amit and I fell in love with her on the spot. She wasn't the type of girl that will attract looks in the street, neither did I want such a girl. She was a childish, innocent-looking, yearning for love, and this was what actually fascinated me about her. The conversation we had, as the movie went on, was so fluent, we both felt suddenly, that despite the fact we met just a few moments before, we had so much in common. The movie went on, but we were not watching. We just kept talking. We could simply get up and leave, but we both felt some commitment to our friends. When the movie ended, I almost forgot how she looked like, thus, we already knew a lot about each other. As the lights went on, we looked at each other. I saw the sweetest smile I can remember. She was not very tall, in fact rather short, which gave her a childish appearance, she had anyway. Her face was round with a short, almost boyish, haircut, deep brown eyes and a pair of rather thin lips with no lipstick. I smiled back and I could not conceal my feelings. We walked outside and kept talking as if we knew each other for a long time. This was the first time in my life I actually fell in love. And what a sweet love this was. We met together the next day and the day after, and so on. Each time we fell in the arms of each other. I am not sure whether we thought about it at all. We were so occupied in love as it happened, it was like nothing else really mattered. She was so soft, and delicate. I felt like she is melting when with me. It was true innocent love. Nothing mattered. "Don't ever leave me, Shimon, promise me you'll never leave me," she said while sobbing. "Amit, I was waiting for you to show up in my life." I couldn't promise her what she had asked. I knew it was a matter of weeks, before I board the ship bound to a complete unknown world. It was for me to decide the path in life, a warm loving home with my sweetheart, or the excitement of adventures which was part of me. The days kept running fast, as each night when I was back from work, she was waiting for me in my apartment, still dressed in her Air Force uniform. For 5 straight minutes we would kiss like we didn't see each other months. My soul felt like getting convoluted in hers, as we kept seeing each other every single day. I finally had to break the news to her, about my coming departure. I waited anxiously to see what would be her reaction. She was still very young and had 18 months to serve. The possibility of staying together, despite me leaving for periods of a few months at a time, looked reasonable. The fact we both felt we couldn't bear not to see each other just one day, scared me as I was about to tell her about my plans. "I want to tell you something, Amit," I said to her as we were lying in bed one evening, listening to a soft music. What is it, Shimon?" She felt it was going to be some bad news. "I decided to join the Merchant Marine." "Why?" "It's a long story, but it's an academy where I can get a degree to become a ship captain, someday in the future." "Does this mean you will be going away for a long period of time?" As she asked, I felt the fear starting to blend in her voice. "Well, yes, love, but this doesn't mean I will be gone forever." I tried to comfort her. "I love you, Shimon, I will wait for you as long as it takes. Any time you will have to go, I will keep my fingers tight for your safe return. You are my angel, Amit, I want you to be my wife. Let's get married then, this way it will be easier for us to cope with loneliness, when you will be away. I'll marry you tomorrow as much as it is up to me, but what will your parents say about the idea? You are still rather young? I don't care what my parents will say, I love you and I want to be with you forever. Fine, let's talk to your parents about it, as soon as you are ready to invite me to your home to meet them. So, we planned on talking to Amit's parents in the first chance, and this was my opportunity to see Amit's family for the first time. The day has come soon, and I was invited to her home. I dressed neatly and took a bunch of roses with me, as I went to see them. The warm welcome I received made me happy and I felt lucky. We sat outside in the yard and drank tea. Amit's father was about 50 years old, well built with grey bushy hair. He worked as bulldozer operator for many years, and looked healthy and strong. Her mother was short like Amit, and didn't at all look like her. She had a very commanding tone in her voice as she spoke, and left the impression she was in charge at home. The conversation was very friendly, until I decided to break the news about the merchant marine plans I had. I felt Amit told them about us before that evening, but they didn't know about our plans to marry, and not the plans I had to join the merchant marine. The first reaction from both her parents was silence as they grasped what I just told them. This meant trouble. Both Amit and I looked desperately at each other. It was a few days later when she came to the apartment sobbing. She told me her parents made her an ultimatum, to break the relationship, or leave the house. She was very young and bewildered. I was not ready to take any responsibility for both of us. We sat down and talked the thing over. It turned out her parents had some bad experience with mariners in the past. Their daughter is not going to be a sailor's wife. We had to break up, or I give up my plans to join the merchant marine. This what they ruled for her. We didn't want to break up at any price. I was not the type who gives up. I was not going to give up all the excitement I had, prior to actually boarding the ship. We began to see each other, despite Amit's parents' objection, and our love to each other grew even more. When I had to leave, we knew it is the beginning of the end. Not seeing each other for a few months was unthinkable. I knew this would make difficult for us. On one side, I wanted to explore the unknown, on the other side staying and raising a family seemed simply boring routine life. The emotional cost was high. I missed my love very much. A year had passed and I came back, and went again and again, until there was nothing left between us anymore. The sweet memories will stay with me forever. The call for launch brought me back to the present. Everybody in the motel got out of their rooms for launch time. This was a routine we were instructed to keep by the authorities, namely out for launch, breakfast and supper, and back in the room for bedtime at 11 p.m. sharp. We were watched at all times via closed-circuit TV. One morning I was taken to the court for an immigration hearing. I filed for a refugee status and while the case was pending, I was surprisingly released, until further proceedings. So, I found myself free in the streets of Montreal, looking for a place to stay. I went to the YMCA Center, in downtown Montreal. It was a hostel, where I could get accommodation and meals, under the refugee status I was given by the immigration. They assigned me a room on the top floor on an 8-story building. I started to plan my future in Canada. I was naive to think I will be left alone. I firstly had to establish a permanent status, and then maybe proceed for the US, my final destination. As the days went by, I met a British man who also stayed in the YMCA and had, so he said, more or less the same problem, and was waiting for a permanent status. I knew something was not right about his story, but he kept telling me about his case, and because he was a good companion to be with, I didn't care he was lying. He was about 50 years of age, had a silver hair, and looked well established and too confident to be a status seeker in Canada. Jim was the kind of guy you enjoyed being with, always in good mood and polite. We went out to have a drink together, every now and then, and in the hostel we hung together. When he needed something, he always came to my room and we watched TV or chat. About 2 weeks passed since I was released from the detention center, and was waiting a hearing on my case, which had to be soon. My room in the YMCA building was on the 8th floor. It was a small room, only a bed in it, a chair, a small tea table and a small cabinet. It had a large window with very low edge. One not careful, could easily fall 8 stories to death. The window was kept opened all the time by the motel staff. There was no net or bars across it, to guard from accidental falling. The lower edge of it was at approximately the height of my knees. When I was looking through it, the only thing I could see was other windows in the buildings opposite my windows about 20 meters away. It was very high and the wide open window made it dangerous, even by just standing near it. This room the Canadian government provided for me, made me feel grateful and had nothing to complain about. One evening I was sitting in my room watching TV when I heard a knock on the door. This must be Jim, I thought to myself. When I opened the door, a big man about 6 feet tall with blonde hair wearing a black leather jacket, entered the room without my consent. I was stunned. My instinctive reaction was to get away from the window. I jumped to the side, and fled the room through the open door. The fear and surprise were so strong, I managed to escape toward the emergency exit down the corridor. I left everything in the room, all I was concerned about was to get down from the 8th floor to the lobby. I ran to the emergency exit and ran the stairs down as fast as I could. I was terrified. Someone made an attempt on my life. It was clear. As I rushed downstairs, I couldn't hear anyone after me. I relaxed a little bit, and kept running downstairs. When I arrived to the main lobby, everything seemed usual, people were coming and going, and some others were sitting on the coaches around the lobby. The people who were seeking my life were much more sophisticated and powerful, both in manpower and resources. These people controlled the police, the immigration, all municipal services, and it was unwise to deal with them. If it came to an investigation, it was clear this will fade fast in a bureaucratic process. I had to keep quiet about it, at least for now. I now knew for sure someone was after me. Someone wanted to make it look like a suicide, or an accident. In any event, it was clear I was a target for assassination. In the big city, especially downtown, a lot of things may happen to me which may look like an accident or a suicide. I had no one I could trust, I was completely alone. If I was brought to a hospital or to a police station as a body, there was no one to identify me. Someone, or some organization with a very powerful and sophisticated is responsible for all this. They will make sure everything is going to look like just another statistic in the big city. I had to make a decision, fast. I only had about 250 Canadian dollars. I had to get out of there fast and I didn't know where to. I went back to my room quietly. When I got out from the elevator on the 10th floor, I could see down the corridor that door to my room was closed. I approached the door cautiously, although it was clear there was no one in there. I opened the door slowly. Everything looked intact. I entered the room and started to gather all my things. In 5 minutes, I was ready to move, all packed and ready to go. I paused for a moment. Where to? It was about 6 o'clock in the afternoon. The days are very long in Canada during summertime, long enough to have a full daylight until late at night. I started to go toward the elevators with my chimmy-dan bag. The people who passed by me were my neighbors. They looked at me and looked puzzled because of my sudden departure. I carried my bag as I strode fast toward the elevator. It was obvious I was leaving. These neighbors, despite the fact I never talked to them, knew more about me than just innocent neighbors. Some of them were with me at the detention center some time before. I didn't pay any attention to anyone, I just kept moving toward the elevator. The first thing which came to my mind, as I stepped out from the hotel, was the bus station. The quickest way to get to the bus station was by a taxi cab. I waved to a nearby taxi driver and he stopped immediately. I ordered the driver to the bus station. In 5 minutes I was in the Montreal bus depot. I rushed to the ticket windows, and waited the short line. When is the next bus to Vancouver? I asked the cashier. At 7:30 tonight. How much is a ticket? $149. All right, give me one-way ticket to Vancouver, and tell me please, how long is the ride? The cashier grabbed a timetable from under the counter, as I was counting the money for the ticket. Today is Monday night, you will be in Vancouver on Thursday night, About 3 days including all the stops and changing buses, he said. All right, here is the money. As he was preparing a bunch of stapled tickets for the long ride to Vancouver, I started to think about that long way ahead. I had about an hour to wait to board the bus. I took the ticket, stuck it in my wallet and entered the cafeteria, for a cup of coffee I needed so much. As I drank my coffee, I started to assess the situation. I was positively sure by now, a surveillance was put on me. Even the speed in which I decided to leave, should not have come to a surprise, to whoever was following every move I made. It was a key to my survival now. If I don't underestimate the situation, I may have a chance to escape unharmed, survive. God knows where and how, if my assessments are correct, the worst scenarios are possible. I started to fathom the gravity of my situation. I had no prior experience in escaping a cover-up by a secret organization. I knew they were there, I had to find a way to stay alive. Someone was trying hard to eliminate me. I was in a complete strange country, without money and with no one to talk to. I didn't know where I will gain the strength from, to withstand the anxiety I was anticipating. If this was going to be the end of me, I thought, then I am going to give a fight. I am willing to make it as hard and impossible as I can. By God, I knew I will be spared. I boarded the bus to Vancouver and handed the driver the ticket. Everyone in the bus could have been my enemy. I was a stranger. I went all the way to the back of the bus, and found an empty seat on the right side. The seat I chose was next to the onboard toilet. From there I could see the entire bus, as well as everyone who needed the toilet. It was going to be a long, very long ride into the night. The first leg of the journey was scheduled to end in about 600 miles, in some small town on the way west. The bus started to roll out of the station at exactly 7 o'clock. It was still not dark yet, and I made myself comfortable in the double seat since no one sat next to me. Soon the night fell and the monotonous roar of the engine on the back side of the bus left me with nothing but to fall asleep for a short while. When I woke up, it was because the bus stopped in an intersection, and was waiting for traffic to clear, in order to get on the new road. After that, I fell asleep again and was awakened again only about midnight, when the bus stopped for refreshments in a remote town. The coffee shop didn't have much to offer but coffee, but that was about all I needed to get into a better mood. After half an hour we boarded the bus and hit the road again. Until the next morning the bus didn't stop again, and it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, when we entered a small town. In a few minutes the bus stopped in a bus depot, and I had to get down and change buses. I was the only one who had to change buses. The rest of the passengers continued to some other destination that took them far north of the country, whereas I was heading to Vancouver in the far west. I had to wait for 2 hours in that station, in order to board a bus which came from Toronto and was heading west. I took the opportunity to enter the station toilets, refresh myself in the clean bathroom. I shaved quickly and went to the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. When the time to board the bus came, I took the bag and went to the line of people who waited for the same bus. In front of me stood a young couple. The man was about 30 years old and the woman was in her mid-20s. I felt they were here for me. The way they looked at me, when I arrived at the line, was like they already knew me. The woman had a short blonde hair, and had a childish expression in her face. The man had dark sunglasses on, and was half bald with a blonde mustache. As I entered the bus, I saw that they already positioned themselves, right next to the place I was going to sit, namely the same seat I had in the last bus. I didn't mind them at all. When the bus started to move and was already on the way, the woman took a sharp turn back, stood on her knees in the seat in front of me, and repositioned herself lying on her back with her head facing up, on the laps of the man she was with. At the instant she was with her face toward me, while turning to lay down, she stared at me so sharp, I hardly avoided her look. It was clear, either she didn't care I noticed they were there for me, or she made me know they were there for me. Or maybe they thought I was too innocent to imagine they were there for me. It became clear to me later, when the bus arrived to a small town, about 3 hours from Vancouver, that they were only the bait to attract my attention, and the real undercover guy was somewhere else in the bus. I had their companionship for most of the journey. They were heading to Vancouver as well, and soon I got used to their presence next to my seat. Occasionally the woman would find an opportunity to send an examining look at me, as I kept pretending I didn't notice their presence at all. It didn't feel pleasant at all, to have someone on top of me during the 3 days' journey as the bus kept moving, through the endless plains of Canada. I kept thinking what was going to be the outcome of all that. I was a target for someone who was looking for the opportunity to kill me. I had to find a way to disappear. And the only weapon I had, was using my head right. Unpredictability, was the one thing I kept thinking of all the time. Act in an unpredictable manner, least expected. I knew I must not arrive in Vancouver, for this would be the situation I ran away from in Montreal. The journey was tedious. Every about 4 or 5 hours there would be a stop for refreshments for half an hour. The following day I had to change buses again. The couple who was following me, surely came along to the other bus I took. I got used to their presence. The fact that it was obvious they were following me, helped me ease the tension of uncertainty. I tried to concentrate on the landscape, as the ride kept going and going. The Great Plains of Canada didn't offer much excitement, apart from the endless green flat fields that stretched along the road for hours, as the bus kept rolling along the way on an almost deserted highway. On the third day of the journey, I started to feel the exhaustion building up from the endless trip. The naps I caught here and there during night or day, were not the real rest the body gets in a normal night's sleep. I was not used to staying on the road for such long periods, and my body ached for some real rest. We were about 6 hours before arriving to Vancouver. The Rocky Mountains stretched in a wild landscape in a view I can hardly forget.